In November 2018, a 26-year-old American missionary illegally swam from a fishing boat to a restricted island in the Indian Ocean, and he was never heard from again. When the news of John Allen Chow's death broke into mainstream media, the world became aware of the Sentinelese. People instantly assumed this isolated group of humans were violent savages, when in fact, this couldn't be further from the truth. Located in the Bay of Bengal, a large body of water in the Indian Ocean, is North Sentinel Island, home to one of the few uncontacted groups left in the entire world. This is a group of humans who speak their own language, are self-sufficient, and have survived for potentially thousands of years, yet still, we know very little about them. For the most part, people who get close to the island are met with hostility, but their acts of violence are far more complex than they may seem. The Sentinelese are in fact some of the most vulnerable people on the planet. To truly understand why they are so misunderstood and why it's forbidden to visit, we need to discuss the island itself, their way of life on it, and the history of contact with them. At this point, the death of John Allen Chow will become much clearer. North Sentinel Island is one of the Andaman Islands, which is situated between India, Thailand and Myanmar. The island has a total area of just under 60 kilometres squared, which would put it as the 5th smallest country in the world, having nearly 30 times the area of Monaco. It's also roughly a similar size to Manhattan. North Sentinel Island is, for the most part, covered in a thick tropical forest, with a narrow white sand beach around its perimeter. Coral reefs extend around the island up to 1.5 kilometres from the shore, making it hard for a large boat to approach. Reportedly, Indian boar are found on the island and are a major part of the Sentinelese diet. The island is also considered a globally important bird area. Despite the lack of surveys, the pristine habitat likely supports a diversity of bird life. The ICUN also lists it as an important habitat for the vulnerable species of coconut crab. In 1956, the Indian government declared North Sentinel Island as a tribal reserve and prohibited any travel within 3 nautical miles, which is 5.6 kilometres, around its perimeter. This strict exclusion zone is in place to protect both the Sentinelese and potential visitors. Entering this zone is illegal and is subject to severe penalties, but as expected, these rules have been broken and sometimes have had deadly consequences. But before we get into that, we need to discuss the Sentinelese people. As you may expect, we don't know intricate details about the current life and history of the Sentinelese. Satellite imaging is fairly useless due to the forestation of the island, so all we can really go off is the limited contact people have had and scientists' best estimates. For example, we don't really know how many people are living on the island. A 2011 census by India stated that there were just 15 people on the island, but that was later described as a wild guess by the Times of India. Most estimates put the actual population somewhere between 50 and 400 people. Thanks to a visit in 1967 by Indian anthropologist Professor Pandit, the man who arguably knows the Sentinelese best, we know for sure that they live in huts with slanted roofs. They have built them facing each other with a carefully tended fire outside of each one. Obviously, there is a lack of medicine in their way of life, which is one of the reasons the Indian government have banned people from visiting. The outside world has many immunities to diseases and access to life-saving medicine, but the Sentinelese do not. If one virus or disease got onto the island, it could wipe the entire population out. We also know that they are hunter-gatherers. They build small canoes to fish in the shallow waters just off the island. They likely also live off a variety of tropical fruits and eggs available from seagulls or turtles. And as I mentioned earlier, there are wild boar on the island, so they probably have a more balanced diet than 90% of the Western world. The Sentinelese have also created their own tools. They have been seen and pictured with bows, arrows, spears and knives. The women wear fibre strings tied around their waist, neck and heads. The men also wear necklaces and headbands, but with a thicker waist belt. And we do know that they have their own language, but we do not know anything about it. Anthropologists try to refer to people by the name that they use for themselves, but no one outside of North Sentinel Island actually knows what the Sentinelese call themselves, let alone how to greet them. What is clear though is that in most interactions they've had with the outside world, they have not wanted it and they have made that stance known. John Chow, the American tourist, paid the ultimate price for this. One night in 1771, an East India Company vessel sailed past North Sentinel Island. They saw lights gleaming on the shore, but they had no reason to stop, so the Sentinelese remained undisturbed for nearly a century. That was until 1867, when an Indian merchant ship called the Nineveh ran aground on the coral reef surrounding the island. 86 passengers and 20 crew members managed to swim to the beach. They huddled there for 3 days before the Sentinelese evidently decided the intruders had overstayed their welcome, a point they made clear with bows and arrows. The crew responded with sticks and rocks of their own until they were eventually rescued by the Royal Navy. Britain decided to declare the island as part of its colonial holdings, and a young officer named Maurice Stedall Portman fancied himself as an anthropologist, so in 1880 he visited the island. The Sentinelese appeared to be scared as most of their huts were abandoned, but there were 6 people lagging behind. Portman decided it would be a great idea to kidnap them and take them to Port Blair. All of them quickly became sick, with the 2 elderly members dying. He then sent the other 4 back to the island, who were still carrying the illness. It's fortunate that this interaction didn't wipe them out. India's attempts to make peaceful contact and understand the culture of the Sentinelese began in 1967. And were led by Professor Pandit, who I mentioned earlier. This was the first visit to the island by a professional anthropologist. As they approached, they saw the Sentinelese retreat. They found still burning fires outside of their huts, but no sign of any human. They failed to establish any contact, but they left some gifts. 7 years later, Professor Pandit returned with a National Geographic crew, filming a documentary called Man in Search of Man. They were met with a volley of arrows, but still, the crew landed at a safe point and left an assortment of gifts, including coconuts and a live pig. The Sentinelese mutilated the pig and buried it in the sand. They sent more arrows, one of which hit the documentary director in his thigh. On another instance, Professor Pandit got separated, and this happened.
At one point, the boy took out his knife, open knife, and threatened me that if you making a round movement of the knife as if he was going to cut me out if I came ashore.
A few years later, in 1977, a cargo ship named Russley ran aground on the coastal reefs surrounding North Sentinel Island. 4 years later, another cargo ship called the Primrose did the same. After the Primrose became grounded, the crewmen noticed some men carrying spears on the beach were building a boat. They called for an urgent drop of firearms to defend themselves, but this wasn't possible due to a severe storm. These storms, however, also prevented the Sentinelese from approaching the ship. A week later, the crewmen were rescued via helicopter. It's known that the Sentinelese scavenged both of these shipwrecks for iron. But finally, the first breakthrough came in 1991. The Sentinelese approached the party about weapons for the first time. They came close to the dinghies and were handed bags of coconuts hand to hand. These expeditions did eventually come to an end though, and the reasoning is not confirmed. One theory is that the Indian government were concerned that the friendly images of the Sentinelese could lead to an influx of illegal tourism. The fact that they removed the photos from the 1991 expedition and banned their distribution makes this theory seem plausible. In 2004, the Indian Ocean experienced a 9.2 magnitude earthquake, the second most powerful in recorded history. The resulting tsunami led to the worst natural disaster in history for Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. The earthquake was so severe it shifted the tectonic plate under North Sentinel Island, lifting it by 3 to 7 feet, even extending some of the island's boundaries by as much as 1 kilometre. Naturally concerned, the Indian government sent a helicopter to observe the damage, but they were quickly met with arrows, spears and stones, so they left. It's unknown how many, or if any, of the Sentinelese were killed, but the fact that they survived shows their adaptability. especially when you consider the fact the earthquake led to 227,898 casualties. The more recent visits to North Sentinel Island have not been very peaceful. In January 2006, 2 Indian fishermen were illegally harvesting crabs in prohibited waters, and their boat drifted towards shallower waters near the island. The Sentinelese then murdered them with axes. One report claims the bodies were put on bamboo stakes facing out to the sea like scarecrows. There was an attempt to recover their bodies via helicopter, but this was met with arrows, so it was abandoned. Local communities have contrasting opinions on whether they should have faced prosecution for their actions, but then came the most widely reported incident involving the Sentinelese, the 2018 murder of John Allen Chow. The 26-year-old American missionary attempted to preach Christianity to the Sentinelese on an illegal trip. He believed he could save their souls. He paid local fishermen to take him to a point around 500 metres from the shore, at which point he continued on a canoe. He had tried twice to offer gifts and sing songs of worship, but he was met with hostile threats, so he retreated. On his third attempt, he told the fishermen to leave without him, and he tried again. The fishermen later saw the islanders dragging his body, and the next day they spotted it on the shore. One of them even reported seeing the tribe bury his body in the sand. 7 people were taken into custody for helping John access the restricted waters. The US government confirmed that it did not ask the Indian government to press charges against the tribe. John Allen Chow clearly ignored warning signs from the Sentinelese, so can you blame them? There is clearly an argument to be made that the Sentinelese people are not violent by nature. There are no recorded interactions where they have seeked to attack people. Instead, they are just protecting their home. Countless times throughout modern history, outsiders have threatened to damage their way of life, even if that wasn't their intention. Understanding this dual nature of danger and vulnerability is crucial in appreciating their unique existence. When you think about it from the Sentinelese point of view, the island is their planet and the rest of the world is the universe, and we are the aliens who threaten to destroy it.